All right, thanks again for signing in. Also on the call with me is Micaiah Guy, our Director of Equity and Grants. And Micaiah can help support the call and help answer questions that you all might have. So I just want to say this call is for continuation applicants. If you are a brand new applicant, this is not the call for you. If you do not have an operational grant or a planning grant and are interested in having a planning grant, this is not the call for you. Connect with me offline and I will get you where you need to be. Please make sure your phones are silenced. We've got the chat feature that Micaiah and I will be kind of looking out, monitoring, and we do have closed captions available. Agenda for today is we're going to talk about the process and timeline. We're going to talk about the RFGA key highlights, and then go over some helpful tips and tricks, and then the Q&A session. So this is the process. You all are in continuation, so you've done this at least once before, if not many, many times. After today's call, you all go back and start working on your continuation applications. They get submitted in e-grants, goes to Surf Washington staff for compliance review. Oh, but then you get to skip that third step because you're in that continuation status. Instead of being part of what's reviewed by the grant review committee, it just goes right to our commissioners to vote on. Commissioners vote and awards are made, and you will get additional funding to continue your program and AmeriCorps members to help your organization and your community. Here is the RFGA timeline. This is outlined in the RFGA document on our website. The big one I wanted to draw your attention to was March 17th is the due date for applications. Again, a couple steps that you don't even need to worry about as a continuation. But going back to that March 17th, want to make sure that you see that there is a 5 p.m. deadline. So it's not just the day, but the time counts as well. Please make sure it's in and that you don't lose funding just because you were a little late. We will then have clarifications and revision processes for some applicants starting around April 24th. And then the Serve Washington Commission gets together and votes on the Grant Review Committee's recommendations on May 11th, which means you all should know no later than May 17th about the award status of your continuation application. And then that notice of grant award from AmeriCorps HQ will come out end of July. Some key highlights. Follow the RFGA only. A lot of times there is reference to the NOFO, the Notice of Funding Opportunity. That's geared towards the competitive programs and something that we at the commission at the prime level look at, and then we do an abridged version for you all, and that is the RFGA. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to dates in the RFGA only as well. For continuations, you have a page limit of 6 pages. Now, this is a ton of space for most continuations. Please do not feel like you need to use all that space. We've seen solid continuation applications that just had a bunch of not applicable on there. But if you do have changes, your limit is 6 pages. Now the changes in the maximum cost per MSY, this year, it's gone up to $23,000 per MSY. And there is some special criteria that could bring that up to $26,000. I'll get to that in just a minute. The other thing to keep in note before you start celebrating that jump in cost per MSY is that there was also a jump in the living allowance, the minimum living allowance for full-time members. And that is now up to $17,600. Although that increase is not as big as the increase in maximum cost per MSY. So as you're doing that math, again, a reminder, this was never intended to be a fully federally funded program. The public-private partnership, so think through how you're going to be leveraging those funds for the match pieces to that. Criminal history checks. Again, I have not heard of any variation in the change of field print and true screens checks for Washington State applicants. The out-of-state costs vary, but for in-state, we're again advising you to budget $68 per member or staff person that needs to get National Service criminal history checks completed. And then I also want to draw attention to performance measures. The last few years, AmeriCorps has consistently been changing the national performance measures. So even if you're using one of those national performance measures currently, instead of just assuming it's all going to be the same, just go ahead and double check using the fiscal year 23 performance measure instructions. Just check and make sure that there hasn't been any changes to your performance measure. Some budget items. We are planning on going back to an in-person subgrantee meeting here in the Olympia area. So be budgeting for 2 days travel to Olympia. We're going to continue to require the national service training, regional trainings, like the one some of us are getting ready to go to in San Diego. So be budgeting for out of state travel plus a $300 registration fee. To be safe, we do kind of advise you to budget for the Los Angeles area as one of the higher cost travel cost places so that you can be budgeting for that. And then I'm really excited that we're going to be bringing back the Leadership Forum for National Service Executives. If you're unsure what that is, check with your program officer. It's a pretty cool training. That is a week-long training in Seattle that roughly a $700 registration fee. That one's optional, but I'm excited to be doing it, so I wanted to put that on your radar. Also optional is the 2-day Leader Corps for members. It would be 1 to 2 members in Olympia. It isn't fully determined if that will be virtual again moving forward, but go ahead and budget for it just in case it is. Member support costs. Some payroll departments get confused on the difference between employees and AmeriCorps members. So please just remember that AmeriCorps members, not employees. You all know this, but make sure others on your team and your organization do. there are a few key employee deductions that do not apply to AmeriCorps members. So please make sure not to budget, and please make sure your payroll people don't deduct this from member living allowances. It's the unemployment. Do not budget for that. That's not required for Washington State. Do not budget for the Washington Paid Family Medical Leave, PFML. And most recently was the Washington CARES Act, the long-term care premiums. Don't budget for that either. What you should make sure you're budgeting for is the living allowance with FICA and workers' compensation. That one is required in Washington. And those other programs, the unemployment, PFML, and the CARES Act premiums, don't budget for this because your members are ineligible for it with their non-employee status. Okay. Now, those special funding opportunities I mentioned, we're really excited that we're going to be able to have two of these special funding opportunities during this RFGA. One is in the area of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and the other is related to evaluation opportunity with dialogues in action. Please reference the RFGA for full details on both of these. And do want to note that we can only guarantee this opportunity for fiscal year 23, which is program year 23-24, and it is contingent on federal funds. So there is no expectation or pressure to request these funds. It's totally optional and contingent on how the pieces of the finance puzzle come together as we're making our formula grants. The first opportunity, Serve Washington is looking for programs who will, we're looking to fund proposals that engage in anti-racist, social justice, equity, diversity, and or inclusion work. We anticipate being able to award between $1,000 and $10,000 per program for this opportunity. And this might look like consultant work or training for members or staff or work to support enrollment and retention. You really tell us. Review the RFGA and let us know if you have proposals in this area and what that might look like for your program. The second opportunity is funding to participate in Project Impact. Project Impact is with Dialogues in Action, and it's a 6 to 12 month cohort-based course in evaluation, design, implementation, and innovation. And I know at least one of you is incredibly excited to see this on there. Steve Patty is Dialogues in Action, and he has a lot of familiarity with AmeriCorps. So he will be training you how to conduct evaluation as he's leading you through conducting an evaluation on your program. So if you're at the point in your grant process where you're going to need an evaluation, this is a really good opportunity. We anticipate awarding 8 programs $5,000 to be able to participate in Project Impact. With these special opportunities, eGrants doesn't support a ton of alterations in ways that we can collect this information from you. So we're asking if you want to apply for either of these special funding opportunities, please include a description and the cost requested in the clarification section of the application. Typically, we tell you not to touch that at this point. This time, if you want either of these special opportunities, put the information in the clarifications section. And of course, these opportunities will come with budgetary impacts that are going to affect the overall cost per MSY. So I want to show an example to aid in understanding. If you first determined the overall operational budget, the program cannot exceed the maximum cost per MSY as noted in the RFGA and applicable to your application type. So for most of you, that would be the 23,000. So if you've got a program and you're asking for 20 slots, that would be a program or an award of, $460,000. Now, if you wanted to add the special funding to that base request, say the $5,000 for Project Impact, then your request is going to be $465,000. If you divide that by the 20 MSY, you find that you're now at $23,250, which is above that cost per MSY. It looks like it's over the limit. That's okay. We're expecting that. That's why we gave that variation on the cost per MSY. So then those funds actually get commingled with your regular AmeriCorps award. So they're treated as such. All of the same budgetary rules and regulations and drawdown procedures apply when utilizing these funds. All right, application instructions. Please do not start a new application. From your eGrants home screen, there will be an option that you can click on that says continue/renewal. That's the one you want to select and go by section in the instructions. The continuation applicants often assume that they know what's happening, but sometimes it changes, and when you only do something once a year, it's always good to do a reminder. So under the continuation section, do you have no changes? Do you really have no changes? If there's no changes, that's awesome. You can put in a not applicable for the continuation narratives. Address all of the different questions asked within the RFGA. But if you don't have changes, you can mark not applicable. Now, you do have changes, that's great too. Keep it simple and clear in that continuation narrative. Do not make the changes in the original narrative. Okay, if you're changing your placement sites, don't go back into that narrative where you talked about that. Just make the notes only in the continuation section. If you are in a stage of your AmeriCorps journey where you have an evaluation plan on file and you need to make changes, please talk to your program officer first before you do any of those changes. And then really look at your budget. We're going to talk about expansion of the budget, but really pay close attention as you're looking at your brand new budget.
Jenny, I have a question before we move on.
Yeah, thanks.
When I go to the eGrants page and do the continuation, it says view, amend, or continue. Am I continuing?
Oh man, you had to ask in my first
Sorry.
go round with this. I'm pretty sure it's continue.
Okay.
Micaiah, do you know for sure? I do believe it's continue.
I also believe it's continue, but let me get clarity on that, and we'll send it out. If it isn't continue, you'll hear from us. If it is, you won't hear anything.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for raising that to our attention, Michelle. Appreciate that. Okay, back to budget. To apply for expansion or not to apply, that is the question. So AmeriCorps defines expansion as increases to dollar amount, MSYs, and or members, because remember, members and MSYs are different. If you do want to expand, if you want to change your MSY or members, please only ask for more if you have an enrollment history that is at or above 90%. This would be a really good conversation. But if you're not at that 90%, please don't ask for additional MSY or additional members. However, you can reduce your MSY or members. If right sizing is what's best for your program, you absolutely can adjust. So use of other slot types. Let's say you discovered that there's a really big need for halftime positions, or a multitude of different program design changes that might mean you want to make changes to your slot types. That's totally allowable. You can make changes to slot types. Just make sure that as you're making those changes to slot types, you're not all of a sudden asking for a huge number of MSY more than you did for your current grant year. Okay, do you have a new program design component? Maybe, okay, but please talk to your program officer. We don't want any surprises in reviewing those. So possible, but talk to us first. Okay, so that's the MSY member piece. The next piece is the dollar increase. So we are fortunate to once again possibly have resources to aid programs in increasing for member costs. Your requested increase should mirror basic increases in member costs, and you should be prepared to share in the increase in member costs. Oh, and it looks like we got an answer to that question. Amend, if you would click the amend button, it would make a change to your current year. So please click continue. There we go. All right, some eGrants tips. Create your application pieces outside of eGrants. It's good to have that record outside of the system, but also eGrants was not intended to be a document creation system, just a document entry system or text entry. So create your pieces outside, like in Word or Excel for the budget piece. And then copy and paste it into the eGrants sections. Remember that eGrants does not allow for fancy formatting. So you won't be able to do bold or italics or bulleted lists or charts. What you can do is use all caps for section headings. And keep in mind that eGrants will automatically double space when printing. So if you're working in Word and you double space in Word and then copy paste into eGrants, it's going to print out at quadruple space. And that spacing between Word and eGrants is not always perfect. It's close, but not perfect. So be sure to print it out and look at how it looks all printed out from eGrants. And of course, save and validate often once you're in eGrants. Some more application tips. Read the instructions, read the RFGA. Oh, wait. Shoot, I did it again. I copied over the wrong slide. Ignore this slide. Budget tips. This is where I meant to be. Make sure that as you're developing your budget, you're fully explaining the calculations used and each amount, and ensure that the calculation in the narrative area is equal to what's put in the associated line item. For example, in the narrative, if you're talking about the travel I mentioned earlier, the line item would say travel to meeting X is $1,186. And then that narrative section will show how you got to that number. So make sure that matches. In the budget, I'm sure you all remember and have the eGrants budgets memorized by heart. There's the 3 different sections. There's section 1, section 2, and section 3. If you're changing things in section 1 or 2, be sure to recalculate section 3 because it will change. So make sure you're keeping an eye on that. Keep in mind your federally approved indirect cost rate and use that. And don't forget the source of funds section. This is an explanation of funds used for your share. Totals should match. I should be able to look in the budget and see, okay, grantee share is this much. Where's it coming from? Let me look down below at the source of funds. It needs to match. And fixed amount, the source of funds applies to you as well. This section is the explanation of additional funds you use. And so it should match the total you put under the other revenue in that demographics section. And a little bit something extra. I know some of you are probably just going into year 2 and it feels like your recompete is a ways away, but it's never too early to start thinking and preparing for recompete applications. And with that, wanted to note that the role that current or historical inequities that are faced by underserved communities that play in contributing to overall problem and need statements we see in a lot of the theory of changes. So Lou actually, before they went on leave, wanted us to share this link with you. It's to the CDC Social Vulnerability Index, and it might play a role in community need and selecting service locations. That would be a really, really helpful tool, we think. Also begin thinking about your commitment to DEI. How is your program going to ensure that your design is culturally responsive and community appropriate? And how are your programs going to create a supportive and safe environment for members as well? Does the design lend to workforce development opportunities such as apprenticeship, certificates, professional certifications, professional development, that type of thing? We're seeing big movement in desire for members to serve in programs that have that workforce development piece. All right, and those were the big things that we wanted to make sure to communicate with you all. The continuation RFGA is up on the Serve Washington website now. You can check it out. And you can email your questions into servewashington@ofm.wa.gov. And with that, I'm going to stop recording.